At 7:55 on a Sunday morning in December 1941, Doris Miller was collecting laundry. He was below decks on the USS West Virginia, doing the work that the United States Navy had decided was appropriate for a man of his background. Not operating a weapon, not standing a combat watch, collecting laundry. Within 20 minutes, his ship would be sinking, his captain would be dying, and Doris Miller, who had never been trained on the weapon he was about to fire, would be the only man still standing at an anti-aircraft gun on the forward deck of a burning battleship. He was 22 years old. He was from Waco, Texas, and the Navy would spend the next 2 years trying to decide whether to acknowledge what he had done. Doris Miller was born on October 12, 1919, in Waco, Texas, the son of sharecroppers. The name is worth pausing over. His mother had expected a girl and kept the name regardless. He went by Dorie. He grew up doing farm work, hunting, and playing football. He was large for his age and strong, 6 feet, 2 inches, and physically capable in ways that made him stand out in any athletic context. He enlisted in the Navy in September 1939, at the age of 19. The Navy of 1939 was, by law and custom, a racially segregated institution. African American sailors were not permitted to serve in combat roles. They were permitted to serve as mess attendants, the men who cooked, served meals, and handled the domestic work of a warship. That was the assignment Doris Miller received, and it was the assignment that essentially every black man in the Navy received at that time. He was assigned to the USS West Virginia as a mess attendant 3rd class. By December 1941, he had been promoted to mess attendant 2nd class. He was also, by all accounts, the ship's heavyweight boxing champion, a fact that his crewmates remembered later with a particular kind of irony, given everything else that happened. On the morning of December 7, 1941, Miller was below decks when the Japanese attack began. The USS West Virginia was moored on Battleship Row at Pearl Harbor, on the island of Oahu, Hawaii. At 7:55 a.m., the first wave of Japanese aircraft struck. The West Virginia was hit by at least 6 aerial torpedoes and 2 armor-piercing bombs in the opening minutes of the attack. The hits were devastating. The ship began listing almost immediately, taking on water, fires breaking out across multiple decks. The commanding officer, Captain Mervyn Benyon, was struck by shrapnel from a bomb that exploded on the neighboring USS Tennessee. He was mortally wounded. Miller was ordered topside. His first assignment in those chaotic minutes was to help move the wounded captain. He and other crew members carried Benyon, who was conscious and continued to give orders even as he was dying, away from the exposed position where he had been hit. What happened next is documented in the Navy Cross citation, in Miller's own account given to naval investigators shortly after the attack, and in the accounts of men who were there. After moving the captain, Miller found himself at an unmanned anti-aircraft gun on the forward deck. The exact model is noted in various sources as a .50 caliber Browning, a weapon that Miller had received no formal training on. He had been trained as a mess attendant. That was not a clerical error. That was the policy. He manned the gun anyway. How long Miller fired, and exactly how many aircraft he fired at, is a question the historical record handles with appropriate uncertainty. The attack was chaos. Smoke, fire, the noise of multiple explosions and aircraft engines, men moving in every direction. Miller himself, in his account, was characteristically understated. He said he fired the gun until he ran out of ammunition. He thought he hit something, but he wasn't certain. What is certain is this: the West Virginia's commanding officer was mortally wounded in the first minutes of the attack. The ship was sinking. Multiple men were dead or incapacitated. And Doris Miller, a mess attendant from Texas who had been collecting laundry when the bombs fell, stood at a gun he had never been trained on and fired it at Japanese aircraft while his ship went down around him. He continued to help rescue wounded men after he stopped firing. He was among the last to leave the ship before she sank. The West Virginia lost 106 men that day. She later sank in shallow water, was refloated, repaired, and returned to service. She was present at the Japanese surrender in Tokyo Bay in September 1945. The question of recognition for Miller's actions is a story that runs parallel to the story of the attack itself. and it is, in some ways, more instructive. The initial Navy reports on Pearl Harbor mention Miller only obliquely as a colored mess attendant. His name was not included. The Pittsburgh Courier, a prominent African-American newspaper, began investigating and reporting on what had happened. They named Miller. They pushed the story. Other black press outlets amplified it. The NAACP filed formal inquiries with the Navy Department. The Navy, faced with sustained public pressure and the undeniable facts of the situation, awarded Miller the Navy Cross on May 27, 1942, presented by Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, who reportedly told Miller that his conduct was in keeping with the highest traditions of the naval service. The Navy Cross is the second highest award the Navy gives. Some voices at the time and historians since have argued that Miller's actions warranted the Medal of Honor. The Navy's position was that the evidence was insufficient for the higher award. The argument has never been fully resolved. What Miller received was recognition, and then, in the fashion of the time, he was returned to his role as a mess attendant. He was transferred to various ships and stations. He became something of a symbol. The Navy used his image on recruitment posters aimed at African American communities, a fact that carried its own complicated meaning, given that those communities knew exactly what the Navy still permitted black men to do. Miller served on the escort carrier USS Liscome Bay. He was promoted to mess attendant first class. On November 24, 1943, the USS Liscome Bay was struck by a single torpedo from a Japanese submarine near Butaritari Island in the Gilbert Islands. The torpedo hit the bomb storage area. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. The ship sank in 23 minutes. Of the 916 men aboard, 646 were killed. Doris Miller was 24 years old. His body was never recovered. The debate over Miller's proper recognition did not end with his death. In the decades that followed, advocates, including members of Congress, veterans organizations, and the Doris Miller Foundation, repeatedly argued that his actions at Pearl Harbor warranted the Medal of Honor and that the original decision had been influenced by the racial policies of the institution he served. In 1988, Congress formally reviewed the cases of several black servicemen from World War II who may have been passed over for the Medal of Honor due to racial discrimination. A subsequent study commissioned by the Army in 1993 identified several such cases and resulted in upgrades for 7 Army soldiers. A similar review was applied to naval cases in subsequent years. The USS Miller, a Navy destroyer escort, was named in his honor in 1973, one of the first U.S. Navy ships named after an African-American sailor. In 2020, the Navy announced that a Gerald R. Ford-class aircraft carrier would bear his name. The USS Doris Miller, when commissioned, will be among the largest warships in the world. There is something that deserves to be said carefully about the arc of this story. Doris Miller did not fire that gun because he was trying to make a political statement. He was not, in the accounts we have, ideological in the conventional sense. He was a young man from Texas who found himself on a sinking ship with a gun in front of him and aircraft overhead. He did what anyone would want a person to do in that situation. The political dimension came from the institution around him, an institution that had decided, before he ever set foot on a ship, what he was allowed to do and what he was not. The gun he fired was one he was forbidden from being trained on. The heroism was real. The barriers it had to push through to be acknowledged were also real. What Pearl Harbor revealed in men like Doris Miller was a contradiction that American military segregation could not survive indefinitely. The United States was fighting a war about, among other things, the dignity of human beings. It was fighting that war with an army and a navy that institutionally denied the dignity of some of the men doing the fighting. The contradiction would take years to resolve. President Truman desegregated the armed forces by executive order in 1948. The Navy's full integration came gradually through the early 1950s. Doris Miller did not live to see any of it. He stood at a gun he had never been trained on a morning when the world was falling apart, and he fired it. That is what we know. That is what we have. And in the end, that is more than enough. If the story moved you, subscribe to follow The Untold Front. New stories every week.